For a few months now, I've been selling parts on my shop for Halo in general, but not too long ago, I saw a review on my shop that got me really upset. It was a picture right here of someone making a cosplay with the parts, and I thought to myself, I should be doing that. I am literally manufacturing a bunch of parts and I've never done a cosplay? That is just not right. On top of that, I was also feeling bored, so I thought to myself, I need something to challenge me, something that really demands my attention. So, I decided to finally make Spartan armor for the very first time ever. Since I have done ODST armor before, but I always thought that making Spartan armor was going to take a lot of work if I ever decide to do it. And here we are showing off some of the very detailed parts that are going to require a lot of sanding. But what you might not know is that some of these parts are actually reject parts that I refuse to ship out to customers. Whether they have small defects that, well, quite frankly, we can just fix easily here, or other things that just look really ugly that I can fix. They're just little things that I wouldn't want a customer to deal with. And I show you guys right here how I put it together. It's with welding, using the soldering tool. And to fill in the gaps, I just use Bondo, and before I do any priming, I make sure to sand the Bondo first. It's tempting to always prime your parts first, but I find it wastes primer. This is one of the pieces where I mentioned there was an ugly defect that I just could not send to a customer. And for me, I could just sand it and fill it with Bondo, so that's what I'm using here. It's only a cosmetic issue. The strength of the part will be just fine. This right here is a slurry mix of acetone and spot putty. The ratios always vary, but for the most part, I just want it to be sort of a slush. What this does is that it makes it easier to apply in crevices and areas where using your fingers would just not work at all. And I sand away with 220 grit once we're done, and this right here is Seymour Filler Primer, a primer that cures really quickly, which is how I was able to make this in a month, believe it or not. A little over a month, but regardless, this was still a challenge and it required a lot of my attention. Every single part was first sanded with 80 grit sandpaper using my sander and then by hand, because quite frankly the sander can only do so much and a cosplay is only going to look as good as the amount of effort you put into it, and it's very true here. After I sanded everything, I started welding the parts for the legs. Right here is a calf, and you see right here that I don't use any super glue or epoxy because if done correctly, welding can make a very strong joint right here. And I applied the same principle right here for the cover of the calf. And this part right here was a little fragile, but what are you going to do? I give myself a bit of a fit test just to see if it works out. And right here's that part again. Some of these parts were very ugly, so they required a lot more sanding and filling. But if you're a seasoned vet like me, it's kind of not a big deal. I just really didn't want a customer to deal with that, so that's why I kept them around for so long. Because I figured someday I would do something with them. The bicep right here and the gauntlet have been around since January, so yeah, I've been thinking ahead since then. So I follow the same process. I coat everything in Seymour Filler Primer once I'm done with the 80 grit, and then coat it all with spot putty and acetone mix. However, I don't do everything by hand at first. First, I use my sander with 220, then I go on to hand, just as I said before. If you look at all this was very daunting to look at. So much hand sanding after just using the sander. A part of me thought there was no way we were going to get this done in time for the expo that I had just found out. But I had to do it. When I found out about the expo, I thought this is the perfect motivation I needed to get this done, because without it, I don't think I would have pushed as hard as I did. During the same time, I was also playing Halo on Legendary for the very first time, the first one. Every time I finished a mission, I just felt something amazing, so I used that to help keep me going during this project. Because there were times when there was so much detailed sanding that my fingers would just start to give out. But just thinking about the game, I had to keep going. This helmet right here has been around since January, and unfortunately it has been weathered quite a bit by the elements. So it's my job here to fix it. First, I'm removing the ring because it's damaged, so we can't do anything about that. So all I'm doing instead is removing it and making the ring a lot smoother for me. So this right here is very dusty work, so I wear a respirator throughout the whole thing. I wear a respirator for the whole thing, the suit and the helmet, but I just wanted to bring it up because that is very vital. The sun damage definitely bleached the helmet from its white to this, so it required quite a bit of sanding with my 220 grit, and then I moved on to hand sanding, which definitely helped remove even more of the residue. I had already removed the visor slits, so right there it was good. All I had to do now was prime it, along with the other parts right here. Using the same filler primer that I used, it cured very quickly, and I think now is a good time to mention the colors that I used for this project. As I've already mentioned, I use Seymour filler primer for all of this project, but the color I use often for my projects is Krylon Matte Black, Aluminum, Cast Iron Seymour, and of course right here, the Metal Cast Red. All of this is what makes the colors work. The black I use because it cures the quickest out of every black that I've ever used. And I'd have to say that it also gives a pretty good texture for the aluminum. The aluminum I use from Krylon because it has the least amount of glitter. Because as you know, with many metal paints, there's glitter and it looks ugly to me. Because of the fact that we used different colors for the parts, I like to coat the inside of my armor so that it doesn't reveal any of the rainbowish that comes off of it. I just coat everything, not too much in the color I'm going to use, but still, just enough to hide what we did before. I always coat everything in black first because it gives the metal a good base to work off of. It helps make it a little more revealing, and if I just coated this on the primer, I just don't feel right about it. So once we're done with the black coat, we move on to metal. This is for every single part. Everything is coated in black and then used with aluminum. However, from here, this is where we use our color. This red right here. This is just a clear coat, and that's why it's important to use aluminum. The aluminum is your metal. This is the tint, a clear coat that gives you what you want. Duplicolor has at least 4 colors you could use. Orange, red, purple, and blue. And yeah, this is the one that I had available. Some parts are taped off to hide the black, and that took a little longer, took away some time, but it's worth it in the end. I repeat the process for every single part right here. Now this right here is one of the quickest paints I've ever had to work with that cures. It is a Seymour Metal Gray, and I had no time to put a black coat, so yeah, I sort of lied about putting black on everything, but yes, this right here cures very quickly, so for parts that were done last minute, this was important. Because it cures quickly, I was taping off parts to put that on first, so that I would deal with that later. Since red, I feel like is a little more delicate than the metal gray, so that is exactly why we applied that first. And here's the helmet that I showed you. I have a talent for turning things ugly into somewhat pretty, but here I am taking off the tape so that I could start adding on the red once again. Certain parts of this had to be rushed, so parts that I wanted to paint in dark gray, just couldn't be done. So we just painted parts in metal red instead. It was a nice substitution and you never would have noticed. Now parts of the Recon helmet are technically white, but I decided to be very cheap and quick about it and just use the metal part as the white, and that's also a part that I don't think people would mind. Because of how much of a rush I was in, I had to tape everything in a single day for both the metal red and the dark gray. How I attach everything is very simple. Right here, I'm showing you guys some elastic that I only used for the belt because I thought this was going to be very tight. Later I found out it was actually pretty spacious. The gauntlets, unfortunately I didn't have any time for Velcro, so I just soldered them together. Very small joints right here. But because of how thin I am, I was able to fit it onto my arm, so there was no issue there. For other parts of the suit, I was going to use nylon straps with buckles, along with Velcro. And to keep them together, I use this epoxy, and to keep it in place while it cures, hot glue. I mark places on the parts where I'm going to put the buckles, on the jeans, and the tactical long sleeve that I use for this cosplay. In the past, I used hot glue to hold this stuff together, and they always fell apart quickly, so I use epoxy because it is much stronger, it'll last longer. And the hot glue I put between epoxy when I attach it to this, so that I don't have to hold on to it the whole time or put tape on it. It'll just stick on there and cure. So that's my trick for last minute things like this. For the whole cosplay, I only had 6 buckles, so I used them for the calves, the thighs, and of course the biceps. For the calves right here, I used Velcro, and I also used it for the chest and back because I just didn't have any buckles, and I found out that using buckles for this part would have been extremely difficult on my own. I also fished out my DMR because if you're doing a Reach cosplay, it's just right to have a DMR for this. With literally no time left, I took everything with me to the expo, and I hoped for the best. And that is it for our Reach cosplay. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and if you want to make a cosplay for yourself, we sell the parts on our shop. So, thanks for watching, and have a good one.